We picture Vikings as invincible warriors laughing at death while storms rage around them. But the ocean has a weapon sharper than any axe and quieter than any assassin thirst. You can fight a Saxon, you can outrun a storm, but you cannot negotiate with dehydration. In the middle of the Atlantic, surrounded by billions of gallons of undrinkable salt water, a Viking crew was always 3 days away from death. So how did they cross the world without a single plastic bottle or water filter? The answer isn't magic. It's logistics. The popular image of a longship sailing blindly into the open ocean for weeks is a Hollywood lie. That's a suicide mission. The Vikings were the masters of the strategic pit stop. They turned the North Atlantic into a game of connect the dots. A voyage from Norway to Iceland wasn't one long haul. It was a series of sprints. Norway to Shetland, 2 days. Shetland to the Faroes, 1 day. Faroes to Iceland, 3 days. They didn't need to carry water for a month. They only needed to carry it for a long weekend. But even a weekend at sea is deadly if your water barrel leaks. The Vikings didn't just use random buckets. They engineered the ultimate water tank using nature's own technology. Enter the Cooper, the unsung hero of the Viking Age. These woodworkers knew that white oak has a cellular structure called tyloses that makes it naturally waterproof. They crafted barrels with such precision that not a drop would escape. And they used physics to seal the deal. As the wood got wet, it swelled, locking the joints together tighter than any glue. These weren't just containers, they were life support systems. On the largest ships, they carved massive troughs out of single logs. Imagine a bathtub full of water sitting on the deck. But you can't have 50 sweaty men dipping their cups into the main supply. That spreads disease. So they established the water cooler rule. A small lidded bucket sat by the mast for daily drinking, refilled only by a designated crewman. It was strict rationing disguised as etiquette. But a Viking is an individualist. He didn't always want to wait for the bucket. He carried his own tactical hydration pack, a Lee Flaska. This leather bottle hardened with boiling wax was the medieval Nalgene indestructible lightweight and always on his hip. Space on a longship is non-existent. You are sleeping, eating, and fighting in a space the size of a hallway with 40 other guys. To survive, everything had to do double duty. The Viking sea chest is the perfect example of this efficiency. It wasn't just a suitcase, it was a rowing bench, pantry, and dry dock. The genius was in the feet. The bottom of the chest was raised inches off the deck to keep it out of the bilge water, that toxic soup of seawater, rain, and vomit that sloshes around the bottom of every ship. Inside, a Viking kept his dry clothes and his personal water supply safe. The lid was curved like a roof to shed rain. It was a masterclass in survival design. But what happens when the plan fails? When the wind dies, the barrels run dry, and the islands are out of sight? That's when the Vikings turn to the sky. A Viking sail is a massive sheet of wool soaked in lanolin and tar. But in a rainstorm, it becomes a giant funnel. When the clouds opened up, the crew didn't cower. They went to work. They would rig the sail to catch the downpour, channeling gallons of fresh water into every pot and helmet they could find. But they were smart. They knew the sail was covered in dried salt spray. So they let the first few minutes of rain wash the fabric clean. A designated taster would wait until the runoff was sweet before giving the signal to collect. It was a desperate, organized scramble to harvest the sky before the storm passed. And if the rain didn't come, they looked to the ice. In the freezing waters of the north, an iceberg wasn't just a hazard, it was a floating gas station. Icebergs are made of fresh water frozen thousands of years ago. A Viking crew desperate for a drink would row up to these unstable giants and hack off chunks of crystal clear ice. It was dangerous, One wrong hit could flip the berg or crush the boat, but the reward was the purest water on earth. In the foggy mists of the Atlantic, they even harvested the air itself. They would collect the morning dew that condensed on the cold sail, wringing it out into cups. It wasn't much, but in a survival situation, a mouthful of dew is the difference between delirium and clarity. However, water wasn't the only thing on the menu. In fact, for a Viking, water was often the last resort. They preferred drinks that gave them power. Rowing a ship requires massive calories. Water hydrates you, but it doesn't fuel you. So, the Vikings drank ale and mead. These weren't just for getting drunk, they were liquid bread. The brewing process boiled the water-killing pathogens, and the alcohol acted as a mild preservative. A barrel of ale would stay fresh long after a barrel of water had turned into green slime. But their secret weapon was blonda, a mix of water and sour whey. Whey is the liquid leftover from cheese making. It's acidic, full of electrolytes, and packed with protein. It was the Viking Gatorade. The acidity kept bacteria at bay, making it a shelf-stable super drink that kept settlers alive on months-long voyages. They didn't just pack food and drink, they packed a system. The grain made the ale, the milk made the cheese, and the whey. It was a closed loop of nutrition that wasted nothing. Life on a long ship was intimate. You slept shoulder to shoulder with unwashed men and livestock. It was a germ factory. Yet compared to the rest of Europe, the Vikings were obsessively clean. English chroniclers complained that Vikings combed their hair every day and bathed every Saturday, making them too attractive to English women. Archaeologists have found more combs than swords. They carried ear spoons for wax and tweezers for hair. But their idea of clean had a flaw. Ibn Fadlan, an Arab traveler, watched them share a single bowl of water to wash their faces and blow their noses. To him, it was disgusting. To them, it was communal. They understood visible dirt, but they had no clue about invisible germs. This mix of vanity and filth created a unique environment where a crew might look great, but still pass around a deadly stomach bug in a single morning. The Vikings proved that you don't need high-tech gear to conquer the globe. You just need to understand your environment. They turned wood, leather, wool, and even fungus into tools of survival. They didn't fight nature, they hacked it. Their water tricks weren't just about comfort, they were the logistical foundation of the Viking Age. Without the barrel, the sail funnel, and the whey, they never would have reached America. So the next time you take a sip of cold, clean water, remember the Viking scanning the horizon, waiting for a cloud, armed with nothing but a leather flask and a thirst for the unknown. Stay hydrated, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next video.